will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a conversation between a travel agent and a woman who wants to go to Australia with her husband on holiday. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Good morning. I've been looking at your holidays to Australia in your brochure. I'm thinking of going during the second half of next month.
Good morning. As you can see from our brochure, we offer a wide variety of packages to various destinations in Australia. Is there anything in particular that interests you?
Yes, my husband and I are very interested in the holidays in the outback.
These holidays are becoming increasingly popular. Would you like to arrange flights and accommodation with us, or just accommodation?
Can you arrange flights from Sydney?
Certainly.
OK, flights and accommodation then.
Right, you said that you wanted to travel next month. Which date would you prefer? I should point out that there are no daily flights available, so if you have a flexible itinerary, that's better.
Well, we arrive in Sydney on the 15th of April, and we were thinking of travelling to the outback on the 18th of August. April.
OK, there's only one flight from Sydney to Alice Springs on the 18th, so I'll book you on that. It leaves at 10 in the morning, which is quite convenient. Shall I book 2 seats for you?
Yes, please.
As for your stay in the outback, you can see from the brochure that we offer 3 packages: budget, standard and luxury. The budget package is about $500 Australian dollars, the standard package is about $700 and the luxury one is approximately $1,000, though it does depend on exactly what you would like regarding extras. Which one would you prefer?
Well, we can't decide between the budget and standard options.
Well, actually, just looking at my computer here, on the date that you want to fly into Alice Springs, there is no standard accommodation available. It's fully booked, I'm afraid.
That's okay. We think that the cheapest one should be fine for us. We don't mind roughing it for a few days, and we don't expect to be spending much time at our accommodations. We prefer the outdoors.
Right, let's look at the room options.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
First of all, would you prefer a non-smoking room?
Yes, neither of us smokes.
OK.
Oh, before I forget, could you book everything in my husband's name, please?
Yes, of course. Are you paying by credit card?
Yes.
In that case, I'll need your husband's name exactly as it appears on the card.
Of course, it's John A. Smythe. That's Smythe with a Y.
John, middle initial A, surname Smythe, S-M-Y-T-H. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I'll just check the price. The room will cost $100 a night plus $10 tax, so $110 per night in total. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Book us for 3 nights, please.
Most of the guests like to participate in some special activities and trips while they are staying in the outback. Is there anything that interests you and your husband?
Yes, there are several things we'd like to see and do. We'd definitely like to visit the cultural centre.
Yes, that's very popular. It's within walking distance of the accommodation and it's free. It's also a great place to pick up souvenirs of your trip.
We were thinking about visiting one of the nearby farms.
There are 2 farms nearby, a sheep farm and a kangaroo farm. There is also an opportunity to ride camels in the desert. Have you ridden a camel before?
No, but it sounds like fun. Could you give me some more details about the kangaroo farm and the camel ride?
Certainly. The kangaroo farm includes information on how the animals are raised, whilst the camel ride provides information on desert flora and fauna. Which would you prefer? You can arrange to see the kangaroos in the wild if you like, rather than on a farm.
That sounds perfect. OK, we'll go on the camel ride and see the kangaroos in their natural habitat.
OK, I'll arrange that for you. I forgot to mention that the journey also includes a stop at a place of Aboriginal artwork. It's a place well known for its stone carvings of animals and mythical creatures.
That sounds great. Are the carvings in the desert?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Well, that's perfect then. I'm sure you'll have a lovely trip, but remember that you need to take care in the sun.
Yes, we're really looking forward to our trip. We really want to try to experience the dream time under the stars.
Of course. That's what a trip to the outback is really all about.
Yes. Now, how about the cost?
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2. You will hear part of a local radio program in which the head of the Park Arts Center is interviewed about events that are going to be held at the center. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 20. Now listen to the conversation and answer questions 11 to 20.
And next on City Life this week, we have with us in the studio Harvey Bowles, head of the Park Arts Centre. He's here to tell us about forthcoming events at the centre. Harvey, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So, what can we look forward to first at the Park Centre?
We've got a very exciting programme lined up for you. The next event will start on the 18th of February and run till the 24th. Times for the event? Twice each day at 2:30 and 7:30 p.m. There'll be a folk music concert and we're sure this is going to be very popular. A range of excellent musicians are coming, some playing for the first time in this country. And for those who want a souvenir, or for people who don't manage to get to the performances, the foyer shop will be selling a CD showcasing the great talents of the performers.
Sounds good.
Yes, and then after that, our next event is starting on the 1st of March and runs for 8 days. There's a lot going on, so you'll need to look in the separate programme, which shows all the various times and so on. It also includes details of performers and ticket prices. You can pick one up from the foyer at the centre. Yes, this year we're hosting the dance festival again, and it's going to be even bigger than last year. It's become a major feature of the arts year, and many of the performances will be recorded on video and DVD. But nothing can beat the thrill of attending the events live. We have a great range of styles, performed by over 100 groups, representing as many as 4 continents. All I can say is book early, because many of the shows are going to sell out quickly.
I'm sure they will. And what do you have for us after that?
Well, then things get a little quieter, but no less interesting. From the 14th to the 20th of March, every evening at 8, we go into cinema mode, and we're showing a fine new film. I expect you've seen reviews of it. Love and Hope.
Oh, yes, wonderful.
Yes, and it's not just an ordinary screening. We're delighted that each screening will be introduced by a short lecture by the producer, who will also leave a little time for questions from the audience. Again, I recommend early booking for this. It's bound to be popular.
I'll be there. Anything else lined up at this point?
Yes, we've got a special one-day event on April the 2nd. The times aren't fixed yet, but I can tell you that we're having a singing competition.
Oh, yes?
There'll be a large number of entrants, and the talent should be impressive. And Channel 6 are coming, so the event is going to be shown on TV. So, come and be part of the audience.
I'm sure people will want to. Well, Harvey, thank you very much for coming in and telling us all this. Details of all the events are on your website, aren't they?
Yes, the address is www.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a student called Pete talking to his classmate Dave about the presentation that he will give on environmental science. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Are you just leaving the library now? I saw you get there at 8 a.m.
Yeah, I've been there all day.
What for? They hire a cute new librarian or something?
I wish. No, it's the presentation that I will give in environmental science the day after tomorrow.
What's it about? I heard you were really excited about the class. And Dr. Schnee also calls you for the arcane questions, as he calls them.
It's about environmental damage in the Yucatan.
Excuse me, what? Or is that where?
The Yucatan. It's a state in southeast Mexico.
So what's happening there?
Agriculture is having a really adverse impact on the environment. There are too many farmers doing too much farming. It's really destroying the forests and ruining the soil. Deforestation is a major problem there now.
How did you learn about this? I don't recall Dr. Schnee saying anything about it in lecture.
Yes, but my brother went there last month. You know, to look at the old cities like the Maya Indians built. That's what first got me interested.
Your brother Tom?
No, Dick, Harry's twin. Anyway, he told me how few trees there were now, and how much empty ground that grows almost nothing. He said the place looked more like the desert than jungle in some parts. It brought environmental damage, so I started looking for materials in the library. Here, look at this magazine.
What's in it?
It's an old issue of National Geographic. It includes interviews with tourists who have been there in the past few years. It's pretty bad. See the photos?
I see the photos, but 1 or 2 photos don't prove anything.
Then read what the article says. Right there. The first thing it points out is how soil samples show it's hard for anything to grow there. It says how an area of 21,000 square kilometres has lost most of its forest in the past 10 years. See, there are graphs. As the number of farmers increases, the acres of forest have decreased. It's an inverse relation.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
So, how big is that state? I'm sorry, but I've never really learned the metric system.
It's bigger than the state of Massachusetts.
That's shocking. Anything else?
There's lots of else. Scientists say there's a growing area of about 10.5 square kilometres where nothing can grow at all. It's like the beginning of a desert.
Oh, yes. What Dr. Schnee called desertification. But why can't anything grow there? I've never really studied soil chemistry.
I'm just starting to look into that subject, but my sister Marie is a geologist, and she says the problem is that the soil has too much saline, with no plants helping to adjust the chemistry. Apparently, that's a common problem with soil types throughout the areas with rainforest. Once you lose the plant cover, it's difficult to bring it back. Reforestation is almost impossible, even if the land is not being used for other purposes.
Wait a minute. What is saline?
Saline is salt dissolved in water. Scientists who have gone there have taken measurements. They do this by gathering a sample of the soil and running a simple test that shows the ionization of the solution. The geology department in our own university has reviewed the soil at the site too. They're right. It looks pretty bad. The level of salinity is going up, but the plants that would solve that problem can't be planted in soil like that. There is a narrow spectrum of salinity in which the plants will grow.
And once you pass the threshold, there is no way to put the problem right?
Exactly. It's possible that no one can do anything to stop the trend now. And all because of human greed.
Wait a second. How do you know these scientists can be trusted? What kind of reputation do they have? Are they reliable?
Oh, they're definitely reliable. They include 4 members of the faculty from the geology department right here at MIT. Here, study these photographs and check the damage yourself. That's what Dr. Horst, who wrote the book here, did. He's newly appointed, but Dr. Schnee said that he's brilliant.
So, where are you going now?
I'm headed over to the geography department to borrow a map for my presentation. You know, this whole problem could have been avoided. The farmers there in the Yucatan...
Pete?
What?
Go take a break. Leave some studying for the rest of us.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about the early history of cinema. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the lecture and answer questions 31 to 40.
Now, we all take the wonders of the cinema very much for granted these days, but cinema really is a very recent phenomenon. It has moved from its origins in the simple still camera to the dazzling computer-generated graphics of today in little over 100 years. Perhaps the real beginning of cinema was the cinematograph, a moving camera invented by the Lumiere brothers. As the excitement at the early screenings of short, simple moving pictures spread, competition developed rapidly, and soon cameras such as the American Biograph were on the market. Advertisements asserted that the Biograph did not shake as much as the cinematograph. Meanwhile, permits were required for outside filming, and import licenses were difficult to obtain for equipment, and there were other difficulties for cameramen. When the Lumiere brothers went to film the crowning of Tsar Nicholas II in Russia in 1896, the camera's ticking noise led people to believe it was a bomb. Although this confusion was resolved, disaster struck at the ceremony when a stand of spectators collapsed and the huge crowd panicked. The cameramen kept filming. It was the first time such events had been filmed, and this marked the beginning of a new concept of journalism. Well, the technology continued to develop rapidly, and often secretly. The thrill of invention and the prospect of riches to be made drove experimenters along. But historians of cinema face difficulties in establishing if an apparatus functioned in the way that its makers asserted. Everyone was keen to say that their machine was the best, of course. In some cases, however, we do have reliable records or evidence in the equipment itself, and then we can see the details of the evolution of the technology. By about 1890, for example, the Frenchman Marais had arrived at results of startling clarity in sequential images. He also had the idea of recording images on a long strip of paper that unrolled in front of the lens instead of on separate plates, but he found it impossible initially to ensure that this strip would have regular movement. As we step into the 20th century, however, we see much progress has been made, and there are many examples of what we would today recognize as films. Questions of the art form were now as important as questions of what was technologically possible, and filmmakers searched around for ideas to draw on. Comic strips were very popular at the time in newspapers, and their structure was applied to the planning of films, which were now being mapped in a series of picture panels. Different innovations were achieved by different types of filmmaker, with a certain amount of rivalry between makers of documentaries and makers of fiction films. One area where documentaries led the way was in the use of travelling shots, although of course fiction films adopted this technique in due course. Various sources for stories were developing, and each would have an impact on the way the story was filmed. For example, filmmakers started to use greater numbers of shots when chase films became popular, because they wanted to show the various stages of the policeman running after the bandit and so on. And it wasn't just different kinds of story that were driving filmmakers to think up new techniques. Other technology also played its part. The telephone was growing in use, and filmmakers came up with the idea of splitting the screen image into two parts to show telephone conversations. All this growing sophistication in the shooting of films began to make the whole process of creating them more challenging. The very first films consisted of single shots and were straightforward to take from shooting to showing them to audiences. However, as the filming developed into multiple shots, then editing emerged as an essential ingredient of the process. Cinema was growing up. Well, next I'd like to turn your attention to some of the issues that I believe were
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Your answers.